Good afternoon. Am I audible to everyone? Good afternoon. Am I audible to everyone? Kajal, good afternoon. Am I audible to everyone? Please respond. Yes, my screen is visible, right? Yes. So, welcome to this webinar on Python and Django. Yes, good afternoon, Balaji. So, firstly, I just thank the convener for giving me this opportunity to take this webinar on Python and Django. So, basically, firstly, I will just give an introduction to Python. What is the use of Python? And then I will give some introduction to Django. So, what is the use of Django framework? And if possible, yes, good afternoon, everybody. Monica, good afternoon. Yes. Gulam, good afternoon. Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Am I audible to everyone? Yes, good afternoon. Balaji, good afternoon. Gulam, good afternoon. Yes. So, firstly, I am going to discuss with you about Python. 1 minute. Yes, so firstly, I am sorry for the disturbance. So, firstly, I will just give an introduction to Python. So, I am going to discuss with you about Python. So, what are all the different types of programming languages? I will give a brief introduction to Python. And then I will start with the Django framework. So, what is the use of Django? And if possible, I will show you a simple implementation example of the Django framework. Alright. So basically we have different types of programming languages. So Python is one popularly used language for doing any kind of predictive analytics. So we have two different types of programming language. One is called as a high level programming language and one more is called as a low level programming language. So we can go for Python, C, C++, Perl, Java. So all this comes under high level programming language. And we have two different types of low level language. One is called as a machine language and one more is called as an assembly language. So Python, basically what do you mean by a programming language? So a programming language is nothing but a set of instructions given to the computer in order to perform some specific task. So Python is one popularly used language for doing any kind of predictive analytics, AI ML task. So in today's world, artificial intelligence, data science, machine learning, all these technologies are growing at a very fast rate. So Python is one popularly used language for doing any kind of predictive analytics. And we have various other types of languages. We can go for C language, C++, Perl and then Java language. For doing any kind of website development, we can go for this Java language. And we have two different types of low level language. One is called as a machine language and one more is called as an assembly language. So basically we have two different types of programming processes. One is called as an interpreter and one more is called as a compiler. So what do you mean by high level programming languages? So Python is one popularly used language for doing any kind of predictive analytics. So high level programming language, it is similar to English language. So Python is one popularly used language. Basically, I will just discuss with you. So why we have to go for this Python language? So what is the main reason why we have to go for this Python language? So whenever we are going to instruct the machines, how we are going to instruct the human beings and we are going to get some prediction result. Similarly, whenever we are going to give some instruction to machines, the computers, they are going to receive the instructions and we are going to get some important prediction result. So we can go for different types of programming languages. We have two different kinds of programming processes. One is called as an interpreter and one more is called as a compiler. So these two are the different kinds of programming processes. So what do you mean by an interpreter and what do you mean by a compiler? So whenever we are doing any kind of code, so these two are the different types of programming processes. All these are the different units that are present in an interpreter. It contains an input unit, it contains an output unit and working mechanism. So how does an interpreter work? And speed of an interpreter, memory requirements, errors and then error detection. So all these are the different units that are present in an interpreter. So what is the use of this input unit? So it takes a single line of code or instruction at a time. So that is the main use of this interpreter. For example, whenever I am writing any type of coding, so with Python for example, as I was telling you, right, so what do you mean by machine learning? So it is nothing but the ability of the machines to learn by themselves without being explicitly programmed. So we are going to give some instruction to the machines. The machines, they are going to act like human beings and it is going to come up with some important prediction result. What is going to happen in the future? So this is what is called as machine learning. From the term you can just understand. So what do you mean by machine learning? So whenever we are writing any type of coding, so Python is one popularly used language for doing any kind of predictive analytics. So what is the use of this interpreter? It takes a single line of code or instruction at a time. So line by line it is going to check. So whenever we are developing anything, and output, it does not produce any intermediate object code. And working mechanism of an interpreter, compilation and execution takes place simultaneously. Clear with this? So all these are the different units that are present in an interpreter. And speed of an interpreter is slower when compared to the compiler. And memory requirement, it requires less memory as it does not create intermediate object code. So all these are the important points you should remember about an interpreter. And error detection is easier in case of interpreters when compared to compilers. Clear with this? So all these are the different units or modules that are present in an interpreter. Clear? So it requires less memory. So whenever I am typing any kind of code, so I need some programming process. So I need to process the instructions and it is going to give me the relevant output. So whenever the code, program, whatever I am writing, it is given as input to my computer, it is going to process the instructions and it is going to give me the relevant results. So all these are the different units that are present in an interpreter. And what are the different units that are present in a compiler? So it has the same units or modules. So whenever I go for any kind of programming process, it has the same units or module. So it contains a input unit. So what is the main difference when I am going to compare these two kinds of programming process, interpreter and compiler? So what is the main difference? In case of compiler, it takes an entire program at a time. In case of interpreter, it is going to take each and every line, whereas in case of compiler, it takes an entire program at a time. And output, it generates intermediate object code. So the working mechanism, compilation is done before execution. And speed of a compiler is faster when compared to the interpreter. And memory requirement, it requires more memory due to the creation of object code. And it displays all the errors after compilation all at the same time. So all these are the different units, modules that are present in a compiler. And error detection is difficult in compiler when compared to the interpreter. Clear with this? So what are all the different units? So all these are the different units that are present in a compiler. So what is the main difference between an interpreter and a compiler? So in case of interpreter, it takes each and every line of code, it interprets. So whenever I am developing something, so I need to check for some errors. So I need to produce error-free code. So first I need to compile the code. So in case of compiler, it takes the entire program. So whatever language you are using, you are developing something using Python or you are developing something using Java. So Java is one popularly used language for doing any kind of website development. So in case of compiler, it takes an entire program at a time. So when you look at this, you can understand. So what are all the different blocks that are present in an interpreter? It contains a source code. So from the source code, this is one block, it is given to the interpreter unit. So the interpreter, it checks the source code, it checks each and every line of code and then it gives the corresponding output at the output screen or monitor. So all these are the different blocks that are present in an interpreter. Clear with this? When you look at this diagram, so you can just understand. So what are all the different blocks that are present in an interpreter? And when you go for the compilers, all these are the different blocks that are present in a compiler. So it has a source code block. So from the source code, it is given to the compiler unit. So the compiler, it checks for some errors. So it compiles the entire code. So the source code is converted to the object code. And then it is given to the executor block. So the executor, it executes and finally we are getting the output at the output screen. Clear with this? So what are all the different blocks that are present in a compiler? So the source code, it is given to the compiler block. So the compiler compiles the source code. It checks the entire source code for errors. So if there is any syntactical errors, the compiler checks the source code. And then it is converted to the object code. So the entire source code, it is converted to the object code. And then it is given to the executor block and finally we are getting the output at the output screen. So Python is a high level programming language. As I was telling you, right, so we have different types of programming languages. One is called as a high level programming language. And one more is called as a low level programming language. So Python comes under high level programming language. So all these are the different features you should remember about Python. So Python comes under high level programming language and it is faster to learn. So whenever I am taking any type of language, you should understand. So whether it is easier to learn, you should consider the complexity of the language and what is the syntax it is following. So Python language is fast to learn and applications can be developed at a faster rate using this Python language. So they can implement any complex logic with only very few lines of code. So whatever, as I was telling you, right, Python language and R language, so these two are popularly used language for doing any kind of predictive analytics. So what do you mean by machine learning or artificial intelligence? So for example, you can take up any real world problems. If I want to predict, so many lifestyle diseases was spreading. With changing lifestyle and modification, so many lifestyle diseases was spreading. Diabetes is one major lifestyle disease. So what is the root cause of this disease? So I want to predict. So with the help of features, they can implement any complex logic. So whatever may be the complexity of problem. For example, I want to predict the climatic condition, whether it is going to be a rainy day or a sunny day. So they can implement, whenever I am considering any language, if you go for Python language or if you go for Java language, you should understand, you should consider some important points. So what makes this language so very powerful and compared to other types of programming languages? So in case of high level programming language, I have different types. I can go for Java language, C, C++. So why Python is one popularly used language? So faster to learn, easier to learn, and they can implement any complex logic with only very few lines of code. Clear? So next I am going to give a brief history of this language. So Guido von Rossum, he is the person who invented this language at National Research Institute for Mathematics and Computer Science in the year 1989. So he is the person who invented this language. So why we have to go for this language? What are all the different types of applications that can be developed using this Python? So what makes this language so very powerful? For example, it can be used for complex data processing tasks. So it contains an MDP library, modular toolkit for data processing library. So it is developed in Python. It is used for performing any complex data processing algorithm. So this is one important library. And signal processing task. For example, for doing any kind of neuroscience data analysis, signal processing. In medical field, if I want to analyze some brain signals, so I want to come up with some important prediction result. It has got us impact in the signal processing task. So Python can be used for signal processing and advanced visualization technique, neuroscience data analysis. For example, if I want to analyze some brain signals and if I want to come up with some important prediction result. So based on the signals, so Python is one important language for doing. Once I am going to train the machines, they are going to give me some important prediction result. And Pygame, game making software. So it is one of the powerful Python modules designed for writing games. For example, many gaming sites are developing. Many people, they are trying to play some adventurous games, detective games. So game making software, Pygame is a game making software. It is developed using Python language. And Maya Python, movie creation tool. So it is a very good tool for movie creation. It is written in Python. And musical software. For example, I want to use some audio players, audio converters. For example, if I want a music that is being played from MP3 to MP4, or if I want to analyze the notation of music. So I want to understand the meaning of music, so I can go for this Python language, musical analysis. What is the quality of music that is being played, or I want to understand the meaning of the music. So I can go for this Python language. And website development framework. So Django is a very powerful website development framework. It is written in 100% Python language, pure Python. So what makes this language? You can understand it has got its impact in a variety of fields. So variety of applications can be developed using this Python language. So it can be used in data processing task. It can be used in signal processing. For example, I want to analyze the brain signal and I am going to come up with some important prediction result. So it has got its impact in the signal processing task. So this is one more important application. And game making software. So for example, Pygame, this is one important game making software. It is written in 100% pure Python language. And Naya Python, movie creation tool, musical software. Till this part, whatever I am speaking, everything, whatever I am speaking, is that clear to everybody? Any doubts so far? Any doubts? Till this part, whatever I am speaking, everything is clear. So I just gave an introduction to this Python. So what are all the different types of applications that can be developed using this Python language? So you can write Python coding in, you can download Anaconda Navigator, Jupyter Notebook, and you can start writing your Python coding, or you can write this in, you can write any Python coding in Python idle. So you can download Python idle and you can just start typing your Python coding. So Python 3, it is the latest version of Python. For example, I have Anaconda Navigator and Jupyter Notebook. 1 minute. So I am going to open my Jupyter. So I have already downloaded my Anaconda Navigator. So once I am going to go to my start menu and I am going to open my Anaconda Navigator. So 1 minute, it is taking some time. Anaconda Navigator. It is initializing. I am just loading my Anaconda Navigator and trying to open my Jupyter Notebook. 1 minute. I am trying to open my Jupyter Notebook. So you can see here, so in my Anaconda Navigator home screen I have different options. So once I am going to click the launch button under my Jupyter Notebook, my Jupyter Notebook will be launched. 1 minute. You can see here, so once I want to create any new notebook, this is the home page of my Jupyter. So you have different options under my Jupyter Notebook. You have files, running, and then clusters. So I am going for new Python 3 notebook. For example, if I want to print something, so I am just saying welcome Python. So I am printing some message. So either I am typing something inside my code cell, I will be getting the output just below the input. Clear with this? For example, if I want to add two numbers or if I want to subtract two numbers, so whatever I want to do. So you can see here, so firstly I am just initializing A with the value of 20 and then I am initializing B with the value of 60, and if I want to add two numbers, for example I am just adding these two numbers A and B, A plus B, it is stored in the variable C. Clear with this? So all these are the different types of operations that can be performed. So whatever type of coding I want to do, so I can type my code inside the code cell and I will be getting the output just below the input. Clear with this? So what are all the different things that can be done here? So Anaconda Navigator, it is an open source distribution. So you can just go to Google, just Google out, and you can download Anaconda Navigator and you can just start using them. So just go to Google and type Anaconda Navigator. So just give here Anaconda Navigator download. And you can just start downloading the Anaconda Navigator and you can just start using them. Clear with this? You can see here, you can just download Anaconda Navigator and you can just start using them. Or the similar things, it can be done using Python idle as well. So you can just give Anaconda Navigator download, or the similar coding can be done in Python idle. So I have installed my Python idle. So I am just giving here. So whenever I am typing Python idle, so I will be getting my idle. You can see here. So I am just going to my Python idle. And whatever I am doing, for example, I am just saying Python Django. So whatever I am typing here, I am just typing Python Django, and you can see here. So whenever I type something, so within this print statement, so whenever I am typing something, it should be enclosed within double quotes. So for example, whenever I am typing something, for example within double quotes, I am just typing Python Django, so I am getting the output just below the input. And if I want to multiply two numbers, clear with this? For example, I just want to multiply two numbers, so I am just multiplying 2 and 4, I am getting the output just below the input. So there are two different ways of programming. So one is called as a interactive mode programming and one more is called as a script mode programming. So what do you mean by interactive mode programming? From the term you can just understand. So what do you mean by this interactive mode programming? So I am just going to interact. So whatever coding I am typing in the code cell, I am just interacting, I will be getting the output just below the input. So this is what is called as interactive mode programming. And there is one more type of programming, it is called as script mode programming. So when you consider the Jupyter notebook, you can just understand. It is similar to the command line. So whatever coding I am typing in the code cell, I am getting the output just below the input. So this is what is called as interactive mode programming. So I am just interacting similar to command line, you can understand. So this is my code cell. So whenever I am typing some code inside my code cell, I am getting the output just below the input. And there is one more way, b equal to 40. And I am just printing the C at the output. So once I am going to run this module, so I will be getting the corresponding output. For example, I am just saying saving this with some file name .py extension. You can see here I am getting the subtraction result. Clear with this? So these two are the different modes of programming available in Python. So whenever I am going to save any file with the .py extension, so it will be saved in the desktop or wherever I want to save, it will be saved. So I am just giving here edit with idle. So I am giving run and then run module. So when I am going to subtract two numbers, the subtraction of two numbers, it will be returned at the output. Clear with this? So what are the different modes of programming? So whenever I want to type anything, so when you consider Jupyter Notebook, it is just like a command line. So whenever I want to type anything, so I can type something inside my code cell and I will be getting the output just below the input. Clear with this? So what do you mean by interactive mode programming and what do you mean by script mode programming? Till this part, everything is clear, whatever I am speaking. So next I am going to give a brief introduction to Django. So far I just gave an introduction to Python. So what are all the different things that can be done using this Python? For example, whenever I want to, what are all the different types of applications that can be developed using Python? So next I am going to discuss with you about Django. So I am going to give a brief introduction to Django. And I am going to discuss with you about what are all the different things. What is the use of MVT template, model view, design pattern. So how does this Django framework, how it works. So when I was discussing with you about the applications of Python, I mentioned about Django framework. For example, as I told you, right, Python is one popularly used language for doing any kind of predictive analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning tasks. So Python is one popularly used language for doing any kind of predictive analytics. So whenever I want to combine, for example, whatever predictive analytics I am doing, so it can be combined with the Django or Flask framework. So it is a web development framework. It is written in 100% pure Python language. For example, as I was telling you, right, so what are the different types of machine learning tasks that can be performed? I want to predict the climatic conditions, whether it is going to be a rainy day or a sunny day. Or you can take up any real world problems. I want to predict the voting result. So whether a person is going to win or he is going to lose a game. So whatever predictive analytics, whenever a person he is going to give his age or he is going to give the name of the city. So he needs to get. So what will be the climatic conditions? What is the temperature in a specific region? So it can be combined with the Django framework. Whatever predictive analytics, prediction results. So it will be displayed in my front end. Clear with this? So it is a web development framework. So Django and Flask, these two are important web development framework. It is written in 100% pure Python language. So whenever you want to learn about Django framework, so you should be aware of all these things. So all these are the prerequisites in order to learn about the Django framework. So you should be aware of the control structures and what do you mean by data structures, classes and then objects. So all these are the prerequisites that are essential in order to learn about Django framework. So Django encourages rapid development, clean, pragmatic design. So it makes it easier to build applications quickly and with less code. So web applications can be developed at a faster rate and with less code. So whenever I am considering any type of language, I was discussing with you about different types of high-level programming languages. And I discussed with you about two important web development framework, Django and then Flask framework. So what are the main features of Django and what are the main features of Flask framework? So it makes it easier to build web applications. So web applications can be built at a faster rate and with less code. So next I am going to discuss with you about the history of Django. So two people in the year 2003, so Simon Willison, they started an internal project. And then in 2005, it was named Django after the jazz guitarist Django Reinhardt. Clear with this? So I am just giving a brief history of Django. So who developed this? So what are all the important features, design philosophies, or you can say design features of Django? So what makes this framework? So what are all the important design features? So it follows the MVT software design pattern, model view template software design pattern. And all these are the important design philosophies of this Django framework, loosely coupled. So what do you mean by loosely coupled? It aims to make each element of its stack independent of others. For example, whenever I want to interact with the database, I am going to create some models. And the model results, it will be displayed in the front end with the help of views. So the entire Django framework, it follows the MVT software design pattern, model view template software design pattern. So whatever business logic, so I will just give you a simple example so you will understand whatever I am speaking. So basically I am just giving a brief introduction to this Django framework. So what do you mean by this Django framework? So when I am going to give a simple example, you will just understand this better. So I am going to separate how the three elements, the components, they are independent of each other. For example, whenever I want to interact with the database, I am going to define separate models. So classes will be defined in the models template, model folder. And there will be a separate folder for that is separate unit or whatever you call component called template. Inside this, all my HTML pages will be put inside the template folder. So in my views, whatever business logic, so everything will be written in my views. So Django, so whenever I am going to talk with you about Django, it requires less coding and faster development. So whenever I am going for any architecture, so if I am going for Flask or Django, so applications can be developed at a faster rate with less coding. And clean design, it strictly maintains a clean design throughout its own code. So all these are the important features of this Django framework. Faster development, clean design, less coding and loosely coupled. Clear with this? So whenever you are considering any type of framework, you should understand what type of design model it is following. So how this framework works and how we are going to get some important prediction result. So all these are the important design philosophies of this Django framework. So next I am going to discuss with you about the advantages of going for this Django framework. So what makes this framework so very powerful? So far I just gave a brief introduction to this framework. So what are all the important features, design features of this framework? Next I am going to discuss with you about some advantages of Django. So what are the major advantages or what makes this framework so very powerful? So it has got an ORM support, object relational mapping support. So it provides a bridge between the data model and the database engine. So it provides a ORM support. So what do you mean by object relational mapping? So it supports a set of database systems. So how I am going to connect with the database and how I am going to perform some important operation. So object relational mapping. So NoSQL databases supported or MongoDB and Google App Engine. And multilingual support. So it can operate on any multilingual websites, multiple languages. So all these are the important advantages of this Django framework. They support multiple languages. And framework support. So it has got inbuilt support for Ajax framework, RSS and other frameworks. So all these are the important advantages of going for this Django framework. It provides a ready to use user interface for administrative activities. Clear with this? So what are the important advantages of going for this Django framework? So all these are the important advantages why I have to go for this Django or Flask framework. So environment, for example, I am going to set up an environment in a database system. So it is written in 100% pure Python code. So we need to install Python on our system. So once Python is installed, so we need to install Django. So first pip is the corresponding command. So I am going to install my Django and I can start using them. So whatever type of projects I want to create, so I can just create a project. So it should be configured with the server. So whenever I want to connect with the database, it should be configured to the server and I can start developing my projects, applications. Clear with this? So I just gave an introduction to this Django framework. So it follows a MVT software design pattern. So whenever I am going to talk with you about Django framework, so you should understand. So it follows a software design pattern called MVT, Model View Template. So you should understand what do you mean by a model, what do you mean by a view, and what do you mean by a template. So the models, they are nothing but classes. They are going to interact with the database. And views are nothing but this business logic, whatever type of business logic I want to do. So everything will be written in my views.py file. And inside my template folder, so I have all the .html files. So I will just take up a simple project and let me just explain you. So what are all the different things? So all these are the different things. So whenever I am creating any project, this is the corresponding command. So whenever I want to build any applications using this Django, so I have to give this command django-admin and start project, whatever is the name of the project. Clear with this? For example, my project, this is the name of the project. Whatever is the name of the project. So under my project, so you have this, all these are the different files. So it contains a manage.py file and it contains an init.py, settings.py, urls.py. So all these are the different .py files. So for example, whenever I want to develop any website, so everything can be developed in VS Code, Visual Studio Code. So you can download Visual Studio Code and you can just start building your applications, whatever Django applications you want to develop. So you have a .py file called manage.py. So it is used for interacting with the project via command line. So it has got an init.py, settings.py. So whenever I go to the init.py, it is used for initialization. And urls.py. So whenever I want all the links of my project, so it will be present in the urls.py file. And it contains separate sections in order to connect with the database. For example, I have databases section. So let me just show you a simple example. So how to create a small example using this Django. So first let me just go to the place where I have installed this Django. 1 minute. For example, so I am just going 1 minute. Give me, yes. So firstly I need to go to the corresponding location. Clear with this? 1 minute. Let me just show you. So inside this, I am just coming like this. So under my this, so I am just going for this desktop. So I am just giving here as project blog. So for example, I am just creating this weather app. So for example, I am trying to open this in my Visual Studio Code. So once you go to this folder, so already I have created some project. So this is how my sample project structure, this is how it looks like. So it contains an init.py file. So whenever I want to initialize something, so it contains an init.py file. And it contains an admin.py.